Bonne conférence à tous et à tout. Conférence Take-Two. Je sais pas ce qu'ils vont nous annoncer du tout. Je sais pas si ça fait, je sais pas. Ils sont amusés à nous faire des fonds verts.
The reason why is because alongside diversity and equity inclusion, there's a new word that's come up a lot, which is belonging, right? A feeling of belonging, of being default.
C'est un fond vert sans lettres.
I know that people in their uniqueness do a lot of mental, socioeconomic, and sometimes social gymnastics before they get to be as good as they are, before they get a chance to participate in this panel or participate in our industry by and large. And I think the work that we all share is trying to disrupt some of those mental gymnastics, socioeconomic gymnastics, social gymnastics that young women, people of color, indigenous people, neurodiverse people need to do in order to be as great as they are, you know, to belong, you know, in the space. And sort of hearing, you know, what Layla's speaking to of a cohort, right, that treats each other as default and where we go together collectively. The program, you know, Jim's putting in place, right, with the endowment honoring Lawson, where there's going to be cohorts of Black and Indigenous people, right?
Il y a longtemps qu'ils ont lancé le live.
And the work that Susanna, you've been doing since before it was cool. Okay, you were changing games, you know, making that dollar out of 15 cents before all of us. All of that work, you know, and with the support of corporations like Take-Two, right, is enabling us to move a generation forward. Specifically with GGP, we have a scholars program in partnership with Take-Two. Some go to USC, many go on to participate in Games for Change, and many have been girls who made games. And that's where we find ourselves intersecting, is at that college point of how do we take them towards professionalization? And then we hope to carry them through into employment, into being experts, right? Because that's the real challenge when you try to discover people. You don't want just to be entering. You want experts, right? And if things are going to really change, like this discussion, you need owners.
Donc il y a Take-Two là. Merde. J'en fous partout à chaque fois. Donc il y a Take-Two. Merde. Donc il y a Take-Two maintenant. Ensuite, nous avons nous avons du Indie Showcase après à 21h, du Freedom Showcase à 21h30, Limited Run à 22h et Capcom en fin de conférence 23h30. Quand je vois des personnes qui ont pris un ticket pour avoir un invitant, ouais, bah ouais. Si, mais je vois, ouais. Ouais, je vois. Bah, puis là, tu vois, j'en ai eu un en double. En mode, bon, bah, super.
I appreciate that. Yes, exactly what you're saying. There's so much more that all of us can be doing. The accountability piece is really very important, Gordon. Thank you for bringing that up. I just want to lay this out there to all our panelists. What can corporations do to really set themselves up for success in the near future and grabbing this new talent, this talent out there that we need to capture to help us build better, more relevant, engaging video games? What can corporations do?
So I was thinking about this in particular as Gordon was talking about the scholarships that he puts forward. So having organizations, companies like Take-Two have to be visible to young people, not just because they're buying, you know, they're downloading the games off of Xbox or PlayStation, but because they're there in front from the beginning. And so Take-Two has been part of our challenge since the beginning, offering scholarships to our grand prize winners. And I can tell you that that's a motivator.
J'avais
for
oublié
kids to participate.
le bip
Not
bip.
just because there's a scholarship at the end, but it's because Take-Two is part of it. Like it made us cool, right? And I think it's that relationship at that young of an age that makes a connection for people. Is like, yeah, they want to hear what I have to say, right? Like they're here because this program exists and because I'm interested in doing it. And I think that kind of relationship with these kids, whether they're mentoring and coming into a classroom, they're volunteering at a game jam or judging games at the end of the competition, they're involved. And I think that it really has an impact on young kids' lives.
Yes, I love that.
I just want to add to what Suzanne's saying. I think that, and something that, we're talking about Take-Two, and thank you for having us, is making the success of Black people, of women, of queer people, of indigenous people, neurodiverse people, a business goal. Plain the same way that the consumption, right, of content, right, get some downloadable skins, buy some NBA 2K, right, that's a business goal around which the business is aligned.
Ça nous parle de jeux, 2K, tout ça, NBA, machin, bidule. Alors j'espère qu'ils vont pas blablater pendant 40 minutes, hein, ou plus d'une heure, parce que sinon je crois que ça va être chiant. Je crois que ça va être très très chiant.
Our business is more successful if there is more of this, right? And that's about people being of value versus just being valuable, which are two different things. There's lots of exceptional people, right, who are of value in spite of their circumstances. They're valuable, right? There's a difference between saying you're of value and that's a business goal in itself. And I think that's the real change, because it used to be, just real talk, it used to be about exceptionalism, right? And be like, oh, you're able to thrive under this duress, right? Isn't that cool? Versus, right, you are actually who we are, so we are going to cultivate you. That's who we are year round. That's what we look like, what we sound like, right? Who we are, right? And so as the lever moves more towards that, right, the same way, like I have biases. I attended Harvard College, so I'm of value, right? There's value in that, right? I'm treated that way in some circles. If the same lens was put onto women, onto brown people, Black people, queer people, then there'd be no, as the kids say, no cap on the change that could take place.
Right. And that just speaks to being deliberate with our diversity, inclusion, equity practices. Corporations really have to take that accountability and, like you said, do what's right in that spectrum, in that conversation, looking at value from different sources and kind of recalibrating our minds to that. But like you guys have said, it takes time. It takes starting earlier in the pipeline. I love that you just call that out. What other things can corporations do that are just different than what we've been doing in the past, perhaps? What would you recommend?
I would even add to what Gordon just said. The looking at this challenge as a business challenge is key. That's what between the inspiration of the social justice marches from last summer and really talking to our chair, Danny Bilson, who said that, hey, if you were going to tackle this issue, this giant generational issue as a business problem, what would you do? And that flipped the light switch on for me. Well, of course, like any business problem, what are my challenges? I've got gaps in my supply chain, if you will. So how do I fill those gaps in my supply chain? And really working your way backwards in a way where you're putting objectives, strategies, and tactics in place to achieve those goals from a business perspective. You're going to see outcome when it's not just, hey, here's a check and good luck with charity X. It's going to be more of, okay, here's a check. This is what we're hoping to see. Let's measure along the way and see if we're seeing progress on that. And it's the measurement of progress and adjusting in real time based on the data that you're getting back. That's where you're going to that's where you're going to see the gap start to close in a meaningful way and be able to point out to other people in the industry, like, hey, this is what we can all do together. What if we scale this effort up and really had an impact on society as a whole? That mindset is really going to be what changes the game.
So I like to think about it as like a pie, When we think about from a corporate strategy, we always think about there's a piece of the pie and everyone gets a little piece of the pie. But I think the way we have to approach this is really the pie is not a fixed size. I think by including more people, the pie gets bigger. So it's not a fixed size that we're trying to all get a piece of, but by including more people, in the industry by becoming creators of this medium, we actually expand the medium, expand it beyond just entertainment. And I think that speaks really heavily to me as a problem solver is when I look at video games, it's such an underutilized tool for social change. And I think that I can see Susanna kind of has been on the forefront of that. And coming in as an outsider to the games industry, I was just kind of blown away that, oh my God, you can do so much. 9 out of 10 kids play video games. Not 9 out of 10 boys, 9 out of 10 kids. We're talking about literally changing perceptions and inspiring and educating generation after generation. And yet that power rests in the hand of a select few. And I think when you think about it, not just from a corporate responsibility, but as a social responsibility, what are we putting out there for our kids to consume? I think we need to bring in pretty much everyone, anyone and everyone who's interested in building a future together in that. So between the pie and the corporate responsibility, I feel like there's a lot that gets lost. I think there's a big dichotomy between these are people that are doing good and these are people that are self-serving, but it doesn't work like that. We have to work together, and everyone does kind of go between what's good for me and what's good for everyone, so.
Thank you for bringing that concept up, Layla. The codependency. We are all community members in this pipeline, and we have to be active, deliberate in our processes, in our systems, how we tackle this problem. Before we end this conversation, there's tons of questions that we have that we want to ask you. So I'm going to pause right now and give our esteemed questionnaires a chance to ask their questions that are top of mind related to our conversation today.
Oula,
So we're
Q&A.
going to start it off with some questions from our other video game industry experts here. We've got
Q&A.
Carrie, she's an
Oula.
executive producer from Private Division. We also have
Je crois
Vanetta, who's
qu'on
a
va s'ennuyer
director
dans
of
cette
talent
conf. Hein.
acquisition with Take-Two. And Mir,
Oula.
he's the head of mobile for Take-Two. So go ahead and fire it
Oula,
away.
je crois qu'on va s'ennuyer.
Awesome. Thank you, Tony. The first question is for Layla,
Je crois qu'on n'était pas prêts. Hein.
but certainly open to having the rest of our panelists answer the question. But at the beginning of your career, did you ever imagine being a leader
Je crois qu'on
in
n'était pas
an
prêts. Hein.
industry that is predominantly male-dominated? And
Je crois
what
que
is your advice for other young women that are interested in taking a similar path to where you are today?
Thank you, Juanetta. I don't think I really envisioned being in a male-dominated industry, although I did envision being in a male-dominated world because I grew up in the Middle East and I was painfully aware of being a girl and how my life was going to turn out to be different from my male peers or my brothers or my cousins or any of that. I was fortunate that my parents were very supportive and they wanted me to pursue whatever dream I wanted. But I think having that mindset and coming from a world that was very much male dominated already prepared me for, hey, whatever I end up doing, there's going to be more boys or men than me. I think the piece of advice that I would really give girls is to honestly not think about your gender when you think about what you want to pursue, because it's all about you specifically. You might end up liking things that people, even your age, your geographic location, your, educational background or your family might not have heard of or even thought of. And that is all the things that I ended up doing were things that didn't match anything that I had seen in my own environment, but I just kind of pursued what I wanted to. And then 2 is to kind of use a very selective hearing. I think you have to kind of develop selective hearing. Listen to the people that care about you, that love you, and encourage you in being more
Attends,
who you
clairement
are,
autre chose.
and diminish the voices of people who say you can't do things because it's never been done, or that's not how it is, or that's not how the world works. The way the world works is based on the world that we build, and we're continually building a new world. So it doesn't matter how things are done now. They're going to be done a different way as you grow up, and you can be part of building that world. So those would be like my 2 pieces of advice for
Parce qu'à la base,
kids
c'était
to
écrit
just
quoi?
pursue what you
C'est
want
pas écrit
and
panel, c'était écrit
develop
showcase, on est
selective
d'accord?
learning.
All right. My question is for Susanna, but
Rien du
also
tout, même.
open to anyone else who would like
Donc,
to answer. And I think Gordon kind of hit it earlier when he said that, you know, most of us didn't have a lot of examples or opportunities. I'm in that boat. I didn't have any programs and anyone telling me that I could do this, and definitely had to
c'est écrit
not
panel,
necessarily an
ouais.
accident, but really had to work
Il dit,
in
tiens,
a
faire
different
une
way,
présentation de
harder
45
than
minutes
most.
à l'E3, il y a
So,
très peu de chances qu'on
my
voit
question,
un...
Susanna, for you is, can you share an example of how your program has impacted someone that has participated or, you know,
qu'on puisse
a
faire un
few people?
aperçu du prochain NBA
Sure.
2K.
So, as I said, our program is 6 years old in New York City.
Rappelons
We're
que
a bit
possède
younger in
Squad,
most
qui
cities that
travaille
we're
actuellement
operating
sur
in.
Kerbal
And
Space
there are
Programme 2,
opportunities now
Ranga
that kids all over the
13,
country
Mafia 3 ou encore
can,
6.
can participate. But we saw in
J'ai
New
des
York,
chats. Donc soit ils nous
very particularly
font full
strong pull
panel,
board. We're actually in
full
over 125
dialogue pendant
schools right
45
now
minutes,
in New York City.
et ils nous balancent des petits
And
trailers
there
par-ci
are
par-là,
some
soit c'est
that
pas
have
fou.
encouraged their kids to participate, their participants year on year and year. And that to me is certainly the beginning of getting this kind of program off the ground, and particularly in schools where students usually aren't offered this kind of experience. So one,
Mais même
having
leur
the
fond, il est
teachers
pas fou, quoi. Enfin,
find
quand tu
value
t'appelles
and really
Take-Two,
and work
je sais
to
pas, hein, quand même.
and making it a part of an annual program within their school system has also allowed students to continue with the program year on year. There's one young woman in particular who won. I think she won the
Ouais, je pense aussi que ça va faire que
theme
parler.
category the first time round when she participated as a sophomore.
Je pense aussi.
The junior year she won again, and by the senior year she was a grand prize winner in New York City. And I hear that she then followed on with a full scholarship to NYU Game Center. Right, and it was just amazing. And I just remember she was invited to speak at the Games for Change Festival after she won. It must have been the second year. I don't think it was the third year. And she came, and we were having a panel, a conversation about, you know, the program. And she was invited to speak on it. And her father came with her and followed her around the entire, 2 days she was there with a camera, recording her experience in this, you know, professional environment, not only when she was speaking, but when she was sitting and watching the other people on stage. And it was so awesome to see that kind of support within her family. And I'm like, all right, you've got educators supporting this young woman, this pathway. You've got her family. And actually, since she graduated, I've seen other kids in her family come through the program. But it takes that kind of multiple supports from different directions to really support this young woman who is a woman of color from Brooklyn, who found her path, right? And she got the right supports, and she got there. And now I also understand that she's launched her own studio and is raising money, on Kickstarter. She's remarkable.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that story. That's so cool.
Nir, do you have a question for our panelists?
Yeah, hi, I do. So my question is to Gordon. I'm looking at LGBTQ representation in gaming. I've been in gaming for more than 12 years, and it feels to me that representation is a bit low than what you would expect, what I see in tech in other sectors. Do you have some data or some thoughts about that? Is that the fair estimation? And if so, why is that? And what are the main challenges that LGBTQ individuals face in this industry?
Sure. Well, I'll tell you a little history here. So when we started GGP about 15 years ago, which is not that long ago in corporate times, queer people only existed on an anonymous mailing list, anonymous to each other. Okay, because employment safety, which is still a concern globally, not to mention just safety, was a number one concern which all of us lived with. So, even back then, weird flex, but I had designed Madden Football, had already sold a company to Activision, employment safety. So that is the number one reason why. And just in this new recent history, have we begun to build the trust and value in each other so as to aggregate and to even acknowledge each other, okay, and to build systemic ties to companies like Take-Two and others to be
Si c'est à
to
21h
move
la prochaine,
from hiding
à
from the
des
industry,
années-lumière,
right,
quoi.
escaping from the industry, to affinity, right, like right, to employee resource groups,
Des
and corporate
années-lumière.
leaders like Tony existing, right? And we're moving closer to being a business resource. And so in other technology areas, that path is further along, where it is, as I like to say, in the batter, that the queer identity is of value, and there's customers, there's of course creators, there's of course business leaders and owners, of all walks. And in the optimum business, you would cultivate, all types of people. As a game craft, we are still in generation one. You even asking this question here, you are a wild pioneer. You are the out there with your machete chopping down bamboo to even ask this question, which presumes that LGBT people would be employed, okay, and then in communication with
Le
each
pouce
other,
qui s'efface avec
right,
le faux fond vert.
across different companies, and in any sort of ongoing concern. So, welcome. Thank you for asking. For those of you at home, we have a Discord and a Facebook that you can all join and participate at any time, or you can reach out to me directly on Twitter, Gordon Bellamy. Wherever you may be on or off your path as an LGBTQIA person or an ally, right? Because I think that's something we've all discovered. And I think whatever population you are part of, whether it be across gender or race or expression identity, is that you don't have to be a member to care. Okay. You don't got to be a member to say this is an important issue. And in fact, a lot of the work that we do at a corporate level is saying, hey, you don't have to do all the work, right? You don't have to push the rock that's sitting on you. We're going to help you push that rock that's on you. It's not on me, but I can help push, right? Because I can see it. It's on you. And so asking these questions, corporate support, time, right? 3 T's, time, talent, and treasure, will move this discussion forward. I hope that answers your question there, but otherwise just get at me. I can, tell you more. And anyone else there who's watching, we can tell you more in greater detail.
Gordon, I know your company has some things going on in the few months.
Oh,
can you talk about some of the activities you guys have?
Sure. So we have most of our content now, in addition to our Scholars Program and our community service that we do with Take-Two, is streaming. So we stream front page of Twitch and we bring it to YouTube, content around equity, inclusion, belonging. And not just LGBT, we just had our second Indigenous Game Creators panel yesterday. Big hit because you know what? Indigenous creation has always been here. In August, we're going to be doing our first GGP Honors, which is going to be honoring the best in diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging in our craft. So we're going to be lifting up the people who do the work, right? Every day in our ERGs, in our executive suites, like Dr. Liggins, right? These people need to be cultivated as well, right? The same way we cultivate engineers, artists, and other things that we value, right? Things that we value need to be cultivated. So we're going to be getting to do that work August. Tune in, front page of Twitch. It's going to be a mood. Hope you're all there.
Awesome. Thank you. We probably have time for one more question, so let's go for it. Who's got their last burning question for our panelists?
Oh, I have several questions.
Burn.
One, we'll just speak. I have to come from the affinity group, ERG, BRG perspective. So, Gordon, thank you for touching on that. So this question is for both Jim and Gordon, as someone that represents a member of an ERG as well as a leader of an ERG. What advice would you give ERGs, affinity groups, BRGs that are either just starting out or those that are established in organizations that are looking for ways to further embed themselves into the business, so that batter versus the icing that you're talking about.
Also, I mean, to add to that, I think the something that a few of us have touched on earlier is an old adage from the business world: you can't manage what you can't measure. If you don't have a way to see how your progress is evolving over a continuum, you're kind of just going, well, I think something's working. Let's just keep doing that. And
je voudrais pas manquer de respect à la conférence Take-Two, mais je suis prêt à lancer la 3DS. Je suis prêt à lancer la 3DS.
Have we seen a positive impact on the investment or good ROI, but we also recognize the fact that the partners that we're working with are making moves and making investments into the future that they're saying that they want to see. The positive feedback loop of being able to say, here's data that shows that what we're doing is having an impact on our objectives, and rewarding that partner or those partners for that investment and for that support.
Je vais faire mon tweet et mon post pour le
what Jim said.
Pour le giveaway.
Make it mobile. God, if you could move that needle like 0.2%, anything, you can't get cut. You can't get cut then, right? There's no way, because the budget's tight when you're moving that needle 0.2%, right?
Yeah, the scale at which we all operate, it's pretty staggering when you think about it. When you aggregate how much revenue and profit goes and gross profit goes in the games business, for a meaningful moving of the needle of DEI, comparatively speaking, it's not a huge amount of money. It's, to have a really big demonstrable impact, measurable impact. If we aggregate our dollars and really focus on some key objectives, we can really move the needle in a way that's going to, frankly, when you start seeing things work, people get excited. It worked. Let's keep doing it. Let's keep doing it. And it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's why the Lawson Fund is what it is. It's an endowment because we want to see it have an impact in the aggregate over time, over generations, and support students for decades to come. Not just have it be this fiscal year, what can we do?
Awesome. Thank you.
One more thing, just to let it go, is just keep saying Black out loud. Right? Let's get back to Black is beautiful. We've been residing in Black Lives Matter for a long time, and we need to be back to like Black and proud and Black and beautiful. And so your existence, right? And saying it and saying positive outcomes after the word Black is meaningful each and every day that you can do it in your ERG.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Thank you.
Good question. We've got time for more. What else do we have?
All right, I'll go if we have time for more. Layla, how have you been able to actually connect with the people in the community to bring awareness for your programs? Like, how do you actually gather people, to participate, and especially like in the very beginning?
Oh my gosh! So the first camp in 2014, we literally like barged into a maker fair with flyers, and we were just going around and being like, you look like you would love video games because you're playing with robots right now. So come to our camp. But I think it's pretty much primarily been word of mouth originally. But then when we ended up partnering with the game studios and game companies, that really helped elevate the program and the PR. I think Susanna touched on that. It's like it actually legitimized us and then kind of made us really cool. Like, hey, you can go make games at these game studios. You can actually make a game at Xbox, PlayStation, Nintendo, Take-Two. You can go into their offices, meet the developers, and make these games. And I think that cool factor has kind of really helped us out. When it comes to speakers and people who want to mentor and be involved, that's been a lot easier because, a lot of our teachers end up being college students themselves, and they come back and they'll say things like, I wish this program existed when I was younger. It sucks I couldn't go to it, but at least I get to be a part of it and give back to the kids. And then same thing for mentors and speakers. There's so much interest in wanting to give back and wanting to welcome new voices into the industry. We haven't really had to do a lot of pushing. In fact, we get pulled in a lot of directions. I was talking to my team the other day. I was like, this is a very fortunate problem to have where we're getting pulled in 100 directions because we're needed in 100 directions, as opposed to us telling people that, hey, this is important, pay attention, and, look at what we're doing. So yeah, I would say it's been very organic, and really the tide is turning. You know, we're building a new industry. We're building on the industry that we have, but we're also building a new part of the industry together. So it's really exciting.
Thank you. Thanks, Layla. And thank you to our panelists. You guys have been very inspirational, very thought-provoking, and have left us with a lot of great tidbits to take away, to take back to our corporations and our respective organizations to really make a deliberate impact in our community that we're building and this whole world of diversity and equity and inclusion in the video game industry. So thank you all. Thank you, the viewers, for joining, and have fun at the virtual E3 conference.
C'est fini? Je crois. Ouf! Je crois que c'est fini. Je crois que... Ouf.
Just loved the sort of 8-bit, 16-bit pixel art style. As an artist, I just kind of fell in love with that aesthetic.
Number 1, Mega Man X, favorite game of all time. Whenever somebody asks me the deserted on an island question, Mega Man X is the game.
I would say Tomb Raider. Lara Croft is the reason why I started to become really adventurous in my own life and wanted to be as intelligent and curious and brave as her.
Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. I feel like that was the first video game that I've ever played where I've seen so many black people in one game.
Je crois que je peux appuyer sur le
Oh
bouton
my gosh.
pour arrêter le record, je
You
crois.
got the Isley Brothers playing on the radio? Like, oh yes, this is where I need to be.
Parappa the Rapper on PlayStation. Man, bring that back, PlayStation. Parappa got more bars than half the industry right now. So I recommend that you all go check it out because it's one of my favorites.
I think it might be Apex Legends, and I know, the thing you're most excited about is the thing that you've just done, but truly, I have been waiting my entire life to play a character like Valk, and it's changed my life.
My favorite game is, without question, absolutely League of Legends. It's been like a decade since release, and it's still just at the top of the charts, and it's where I go with all my friends and hang out. It's my go-to.
That was the first female I actually ever seen play video games. It's my mother, and she loved Double